Hi everyone. I see lots of hellos coming through on the chat function, which is great to see so many of you joining us from all over the country and beyond. Thank you so much for joining today's conversation with Cranlana and the Institute of Executive Coaching and Leadership, or IECL, on coaching for executive practice. For those of you that I don't yet know, I'm Catherine Wu. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Engagement at Cranlana. And I'm delighted to be joined by Charity Becker, Head of Coaching and Leader Development at IECL. Hi, Charity, welcome.
Thank you, Catherine. It's very exciting to be here.
So I'm joining today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge this land was never ceded and we pay our respects to their elders past and present, recognizing this continuing connection to country. I'd also like to extend this respect to the traditional owners of the lands from which each of you in our group today joins us. So today, Charity and I and all of you are going to be exploring the question of how do we move from ethics and integrity as concepts to ongoing practice? How do we build long-term ethical goals and habits, and how might a coaching approach support this? And this conversation grows out of a new partnership and an exchange between Cranlana and IECL, and really an ongoing conversation between Charity and myself as well, about how our respective disciplines of ethical leadership and coaching might intersect and inform one another. And as part of this exploration, we recently had an exchange of prisoners. Charity participated in Cranlana's Executive Colloquium in Melbourne, and I recently completed IECL's Organisational Coaching Certification 1. So in swapping places, I think both Charity and I, and we've talked about this, have observed some of the key things that link coaching and ethical leadership, like, for instance, the practice of inquiry. Both disciplines are often about asking better questions rather than prescribing answers. Both really value creating space for reflection, staying curious when things get complex or uncomfortable, and remaining committed to change even when it's difficult. And we've also observed the potential complementarity between the two disciplines. And today we're going to look at how can coaching support ethical practice beyond a program. We'll look at what it means to treat ethics as a verb rather than a noun, and how coaching can help close the gap between knowing what's right and actually doing it. So before we get into it, as a housekeeping note, we're running both a chat and a Q&A function during this webinar. I see most people have already discovered the chat function, which is great. You can share comments, hellos, reflections in the chat throughout, and it's also where the Cranlana and IECL teams online today will drop any links or resources as we go along. And I also invite everyone to please also look for the Q&A box, which you'll find at a tab at the bottom of your screen. You can put your questions in there, which we'll be coming to a little later in the session, and you can also upvote the questions that you like or have an interest in, and we'll pick those up soon. So let's dive in. Charity,
Yes.
as I mentioned earlier this year, you spent 5 days at Cranlana's Executive Colloquium. Now, for those of you who haven't attended the colloquium, it's an intensive program. It explores the big organizing ideas that shape our world, and then it really asks each learner to reckon with how this sits with them. And so, Charity, I just want to open by asking, what stayed with you from the colloquium? How did you find it?
Yes, so I just want to start by acknowledging the Wadawurrung people, which is the traditional owners of the land that I am joining from, part of the Kulin Nation. I have the unusual smug ability to say that the weather is better on the surf coast of Victoria today than it is that I hear in Sydney. So it's blue skies and sunny where I am, but also to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people's ongoing custodianship of the land and waters on which we live. And to acknowledge that they've never ceded sovereignty, and that we still have work to do, particularly when we're talking about ethical leadership, to continue the conversation around reconciliation in this country through talking and through acts. So thank you for that. How I left the colloquium, I finished it, it was 3 months ago, almost to this week. I think something about the intensity of it. So the 5 full days, we spend a lot of time in work that I do with leaders talking about urgent versus important. to be able to clear 5 days and really focus on important and have to hold back a lot of the BAU urgent stuff that comes through, it left me with my eyes more open, but also this ongoing unsettled feeling that I haven't been able to shake for 3 months. So, you know, the course should come with a warning, where I can't, whereas usually when I have a moment of, oh, I don't know what to do about that, I should probably do something about that, but I'm just going to put on another episode of Ted Lasso.
Mm.
What the colloquium left me with was a really strong sense that I have more available to me in terms of moral agency. I don't need to feel as helpless, I think, as I often do in the cause of big changes that I think should happen. And that it made it impossible for me to unfeel what I'm usually able to suppress with busyness. So the concept that runs through the 5 days of what is the current reality versus what ought to be around, goals or what makes a good life or a good organization or a good leader. I can't shake it, and I don't know what to do with it either. So I haven't done anything impressive since, but that's what I was left with, a kind of stronger sense that as a parent, a citizen, a leader, and a coach, there's more that I ought to be doing if I want my time on this earth to lead to a greater good.
Thanks for sharing that, Charity. And yeah, I mean, I think this is something that we often hear from Cranlana learners is, wow, that was an eye-opening experience.
Yep.
Now I'm catapulted back into my very busy, very crowded life. And what do I do next? What do I do with this? And I think this connects to a gap we sometimes see between knowledge and practice, especially in ethics and leadership. I mean, as I mentioned, I recently completed the IECL coaching set, and I was sort of reflecting on my post-program experience. And I think coaching has this advantage of being really clearly active and relational. So when someone says coaching, you envisage two people having a conversation like we are now, doing the work together. It's a verb, it's scheduled, it's intentional. It literally requires booking something in and showing up.
Yes.
Yeah, but ethics and
Yep.
leadership, I think there's a risk that they're treated as nouns. There's something you possess or you don't. And so I
Yes.
really want to explore like what could ethics look as a verb and look like as a verb, and how might coaching be able to help with this. So
Yeah.
with that in mind, as you know, I recently completed my coaching set, and I'm wondering, Charity, if you'd be willing for me to run a brief coaching demo with you using the GROW coaching framework. So for those of you who don't know what GROW is, it's a coaching framework structured around goals, reality, options, and wrap up to explore some of your insights from Nicole. Are you up for it?
I'm up for it.
You're up for
I'm
it.
up for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So we won't contract, we'll go straight into the coaching session. We'll use the GROW framework. We'll do what's called a SMART wrap up, which I'll explain towards the end, and then we'll spend a bit of time unpacking.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. All right. So, Charity, what's an ethical dilemma that you are currently grappling with?
So, when you asked me if I would do this, the one that came to mind that is really unresolved for me is this experiences going on in lots of different organizations, including my own, around a return to the office policy or framework. And it is a dilemma for me because I'm not clear about right or wrong. I am very aware that I have a strong bias based on the fact that I live on the surf coast of Victoria. And I don't really like wearing shoes. I used to spend a lot of time driving in and out of Melbourne and flying to Sydney and flying all over the place. And since COVID, I've got to spend a lot more time with my kids and at the beach. So there's that. But I also can see how it felt to me that one of the silver linings of COVID was that people were able to get time back that was spent commuting, that people were able to engage more in their local communities or be more part of their schools, spend more time with their families, spend more time exercising or even sleeping, and that it didn't have an effect on like productivity. There are a lot of examples of where teams have done it. And so my dilemma, both leading a team, working in an organization that leads teams, but also coaching in multiple different organizations, all who have different perspectives on this, is like, what do you do with that ethical? I don't know what to do about it. I know that I'm pulled in multiple different directions, but I have the discomfort and no clear way forward.
Mm. So if you were to articulate a goal around finding your way through this, what would that be?
Some further clarity around what it is that's eating me up about it, but also a next step, like something to do. I'm stuck in a really an ethical dilemma around how do I lead? How do I take a perspective or even take a stand? Where do I stand? Yeah, any action would set me on a path to move forward.
Mm. And so what would be the ideal state at the end of this conversation?
That I know what I'm going to do next, even if that thing is small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So tell me a bit more. What personal values of yours make this a relevant issue for you?
I think a really strong personal value of mine, and it's one of the reasons I like coaching so much, is the idea of, coaching is an adult learning intervention, and it allows for the fact that adults are intelligent and have an experience and do best when they're allowed to make decisions for themselves. So that sense of not telling grown-ups where they need to do their job, particularly after they've shown for the last 5 years that they don't need to be told that. I also have a personal value around independence and autonomy, sometimes which can be overplayed, which I'm aware of, which may be coming into it. But I think there is something in there about respect and telling smart people you need to go and sit at a desk to do your job. Really, it doesn't feel quite right to me.
What else?
I hadn't thought about this until you just asked it then, but because of where I live, my role is very likely to stay remote. And so I feel an unfair sense of privilege that just because I happen to live regionally, I miss out on, I don't have to do the commute. I don't have to show up in a certain way. I can still be 5 days a week in my Ugg boots in winter or bare feet in summer, and no one would know the difference. And that's actually a new thought. I think that's making me feel uncomfortable because not everybody that I work with and not everybody that I coach or teach has that same privilege. Oh, this is making me feel worse. Ask another. Next.
So what is holding you back from making a call on this?
I think partly it's that I know that I have always had strong views on things, and so I might be wrong. So, like part of me is waiting for someone to come up with a good argument that I can go, oh yeah, fair enough. In that case, that makes perfect sense. I'm never quite sure that I'm right, even though I'm opinionated. That's holding me back. Part of it, I think, is just the general sense of choosing your battles. And do I have the energy between all of my other stuff that I deal with to sit down and really think about this? And even if I did, do I want to die on this hill? I'm not sure. And also a sense of like, is this just my stuff? Is this just my tendency to be rebellious, non-compliant. Like maybe it is just a personality thing.
Mm. So if you landed somewhere on
Mm.
this, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Oh, if I landed somewhere on this, the worst thing that could happen is, I don't know, people would disagree with me. That's probably it. Maybe I'd learn something and change my mind. But yeah, people would
Hmm.
disagree with me.
What's the best thing that might happen?
Maybe my voice would make it safe for other people who are feeling the same thing but don't have the same psychological safety to voice it. Maybe it would open a door. Maybe it would start a different conversation around, well, what's the downside of asking people to do this? And, you know, what's the experiment we could play? It might, yeah, the worst that could happen is not much. The best that could happen is maybe something would open up for people that don't, that it would help if I had stood in the firing line in some ways. And it's not much of a
Mm.
firing line for me.
Mm. So what's the smallest thing you could do?
Hmm. Ask the question on LinkedIn, like as an open question. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. What are other people thinking? What are the pros and cons? Start a conversation rather than throw down a gauntlet. That'd be the smallest thing.
Mm. What are you learning about yourself as we talk?
So inconvenient having these conversations because what I'm learning is what everybody else learns when they get coached, is that if you invest like 10 minutes and sit still and have someone ask you questions and hold back all of the other noise, you can actually get to something.
Mm.
And that I'm learning, maybe in terms of what I was saying as an effect of doing the colloquium, maybe one of the ways that I can do more good with my time on this earth is by being just a little bit braver and more public. And honestly, asking an open question on LinkedIn is not scary, but doing like a little thing that
Mm.
might start something.
Mm. So what are you going to commit to from here?
Do you know what? When I agreed to this, I didn't think it through because now there's all of these people.
Yeah. Oops.
Whoops. Talk about accountability. Okay, I'm gonna ask an open question on LinkedIn. Far out. I didn't think about the accountability piece. Yeah, I'm gonna ask an open question on LinkedIn around what's the conversation we need to have about return to work policies.
When are you going to do that?
Oh, I hate coaches. You're good at this. When am I going to do it? End of close of business today. I'll put something on LinkedIn.
Oh gosh, this is very, this is
Yeah,
my
I
accountability. I
know.
love this. So you're going to post, and so we're going to do a smart wrap up now.
Yep.
That SMART is about, it's an acronym, making the commitment specific, measurable, and with a time frame.
Yep.
Specific, measurable, attractive, realistic with a time frame. So you're going to do an open question on LinkedIn. End
Yep.
of today, you got a whole heap of people online who are
Yeah.
accountable. Um, Charity, is that a good place for us to end our pretty quick coaching session that I feel we could have opened up even more, but for reasons of time.
There's just one other thing because I'm forgetful. So I've
Mm.
pulled out a Sharpie. I'm going to put a big question mark on my hand. It's not going to show up so that I remember to do it.
Yeah. Accountable to the Sharpie and to
Yeah.
the few hundred people online.
Thank you for that. I really didn't, when I agreed to that, I really didn't think that through.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Charity. Bravo. Thank you for
Good
doing that
coaching.
with me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being such an amazing counterpart. So we've just seen a demo in play. I see there's lots that has come through on the chat, which I'm looking forward to kind of reflecting back on through our conversation. But before we do, let's step back a moment and speak a bit about the principles behind what we've just played out. So Charity, in a fairly succinct manner, can you tell us a bit like about what is coaching? What's the theory behind it?
Yeah. So as I said before, it's an adult learning intervention, although, it works pretty well with kids too. But it's the idea that we overplay in a lot of our society telling people what we think they should do,
Mm.
which takes away their opportunity to learn for themselves, to be creative and innovative, come up with their own answers, experiment, and also to own their own agency and decision making and build on their own capability. So it's the idea that when someone says, what do you think I should do, Catherine? Instead of answering that, you say, well, you're a capable person, Charity. What do you think you should do? So it's
Mm.
an inquiry-based dialogue.
Mm.
Um, in terms of the return on investment of something like that, it needs to have new thinking, which is what the questions are there to generate, and then new behavior or an action, which is, exactly what you just did with that smart wrap up. But it's really a trust-based dialogue that holds in its central philosophy that individuals who are capable, resourceful, and intelligent only get the opportunity to bring that to life if we stop telling them what to do and what to think and how to do it.
Mm.
And it can be a hard thing to do if you like problem solving for people or you like sharing your wisdom. But I'm 20 years into this game now, and the thing that I'm still loving about coaching is that, just as you demonstrated then, people don't need your advice anywhere near as much as you think they do or they think they do. And so it's a way to flip that. It also really builds in accountability. All of those questions you asked me, well, what could you do? Not what
Mm.
could we do, or what should change in the system, or what should boards and CEOs do? It's like, okay, what could you do? What's the smallest thing you could do? So it builds accountability and agency, which
Mm.
tends to give people a sense of self-confidence,
Mm.
um, and helps them remember that they are, in fact, responsible for their own choices.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's, I would say, one of the biggest takeaways for me from the coaching course that I took, which is like this idea of the gold is with the counterpart, that you are working as a coach to surface the wisdom within. And I
Yep.
think there's something really potentially transformative there in the context of ethics, because I think people can sometimes conflate ethics with morality, which
Mhm.
is a transmitted or default wisdom that's passed down from external authorities, whether they're your parents or their religion or their laws or their etiquette, telling us what's right through rules. It kind of presumes that there's a right answer,
Mhm.
or some kind of universal law. And I think the coaching mindset that you've just described, that the gold is with the counterpart, the wisdom is within, um, is something that could inform ethics, where you might already know what's right, or you might be able to get there through the application of reason, values, experience. You might already be able to get that internal sense of what is right. And so the work is actually helping you access and act on that wisdom rather
Yeah.
than receive that wisdom from someone outside of yourself. So that's where I think coaching can be so powerful for ethical practice. And it's really because it's designed for closing the say-do gap.
Yes. And I think, any good coaching conversation helps the counterpart, which, by the way, is IECL language for coaching. It's a way that we made up the word to try and create some equality in the relationship, but it helps the counterpart question whether or not the current reality is something that they can change. And so in terms of is and ought,
Mm.
they can look at the is, what is the current reality?
Mm.
And then what could you do about it? If you could do something, what might that be? And it allows for, well, hang on, maybe I could throw a stone that would make a ripple. And I
Mm.
certainly won't know if I don't do anything. And I think, that is often, like you're saying about morality, comes from externally as well. Like this is just how it is. This is just how organizations are. This is just how we do things around here. And coaching brings in okay, but what if you could do something? What
Mm.
could be possible? What could be one small thing? And it builds both a capacity to question the status quo, but also think creatively or more innovatively around, well, what if it were different? And
Mm.
if I wanted it to be different, if that would be aligned to my inner ethics, my values, what could I start doing that might nudge me in that direction?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a foundational principle there, which I think ethical leadership shares, which is there is the ability to imagine a different, an alternative, a better way.
Yes.
And I think what sometimes I see when we speak to people on ethics is that sometimes they can feel really overwhelmed by the grand ambition of it all, of ethical change, thinking that we need to transform things overnight. Now, I'm not saying there are some things we need to transform overnight, but I think when that feels too much
Yes.
and it paralyzes us,
Yes.
what coaching can help us do is to kind of break goal setting down into manageable, accountable actions. Just like I kind of asked you then, like, what's the smallest step you could take? You don't need to move out here. You
Yes.
might have an awareness, a situational awareness of what's out there, but start in front of you.
Yeah. And but the goal can be big, right? So
Mm,
that feeling that I talked about after the colloquium where I don't like the goal's so big, it's like the whole world big. And some of the work that happened in that course, it really did expand my sense of, well, something needs to change. Like this isn't, which there's more to be done here. So the goal can be big, but the action doesn't need to be. And I think the other risk of kind of ethics is that it can get stuck in philosophy or conceptualism.
yeah.
And I think what coaching could do is bridge the gap between, for me, I want to make the world a fairer, more respectful place for everybody.
Mm,
Okay, what's the smallest thing you could do? Post a question on LinkedIn by the end of the day. One of those things is maybe admirable and but overwhelming and doesn't leave me feeling like I can move to it. But in a short amount of time, you were able to get me to something. And maybe a little bit of that restlessness will be, will be alleviated by the time I've done it. And maybe I'll feel a bit confident to like try the next thing, knowing that, oh, well,
mm,
I'd said that thing and the world didn't end.
It's a brick
Yeah.
in the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And particularly, when we're talking about ethical leadership, one of the concepts explored in the colloquium is this idea of duty.
Mm,
Like as that coaching that you just did with me is still percolating, I'm thinking, I'm not even sure. I think it might be my duty to lead some of these conversations with the skills
mm,
that I have and the role that
mm,
I'm in. It's not even oh, well, maybe I should it's like, no, you're in this position now. You can do
mm,
these things relatively
mm,
safely. Why would you not?
mm, mm.
So it does, I think it does, where coaching could turn the concepts from ethical leadership into a better world.
Yeah.
It's about saying, okay, what can you actually do? What can you actually do? What can you actually do by the end of today?
Mm. So building on that, I think it might be useful here to break down what I see as some of the key components or verbs of ethical practice that coaching could support.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to look at three. Firstly, there's observing ethical dimensions in everyday situations, training ourselves to notice
Mm-hmm.
what is sometimes invisible until we make it visible when our decisions or our actions or our biases affect the well-being or dignity of others.
Yep.
Secondly, working through ethical dilemmas and our accountabilities associated to those dilemmas when we truly don't know what's right, and we're bringing curiosity and inquiry to that process, just as you did in that demo. And
Mm-hmm.
then finally, integrity challenges, which is where we know what's right, but we struggle to act on it, maybe because of
Yep.
fears or norms or competing priorities or pressures. This is often where we see a lot of ethics in the news when
Mm.
there's been some kind of integrity challenge and there's been some kind of failure of not only ethics, but I think leadership or courage or culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really keen to move into looking at that third category with you now, because another thing that stayed with me from the coaching set was coaching as an act that removes interferences that stand between potential and performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of curious to hear from you around if you have examples of maybe people you've coached
Yeah.
or yourself where you've had an integrity challenge where you've known, or the people you've been coaching, your counterparts have known what they should do, but
Ought
they've
to do.
struggled to do it because of an interference was getting in the way.
Yes. It's pretty ubiquitous, actually. The kind of smallest, most common example that comes up in my coaching, and sometimes with very senior leaders is I need to give difficult feedback or negative feedback to someone in my team who I like and care about. And I know that I should do it. I know that I ought to do it, but I really don't want to. And sometimes what gets in the way, if you're talking about interferences, of doing the right thing, and it's only since you and I have been talking, Catherine, that I've even framed that as an ethical dilemma, and I'm now very clear that it is. It's not often talked about like that, but it is an ethical dilemma where you've got two competing goods. So you've got I want to be honest.
Yeah.
And tell the truth and have integrity, and I want to be kind, or I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. The reason I'm getting clearer on the fact that it is an ethical dilemma is that in the long run, the best thing for that person is the truth, because I often see people a long way down the line when leaders have failed to have the courage to have the conversations they should have had, and it damages people's careers long term. It has long-term negative repercussions, but I think often what gets in the way is either these two competing goods. You know, I want to be liked, I want to continue my relationship with this person, and I want to tell the truth, but also fear of repercussions, fear of complaints, fear of saying the wrong thing and ending up in front of Fair Work or getting negative feedback themselves, fear of the reactions of other human people. And it stops leaders do what all of them say. So what's consistent is that all of them say, I ought to do this. And all of them will say, if I were that person, I would want to be told, but I'm still stuck. And so I think there's a lot of talk from leaders around leadership, and you know, a lot of organizations have values written on their lanyards. I think there's what's not discussed is a lot of fear, and coaching can help unearth that, but not get stuck in it. Like, okay, what are the interferences? What's getting in the way? What's the worst case scenario? How could you overcome those? What could you do to get around that? How could you manage those interferences so that you could do what you know you need to do?
So we're going to come to Q&A shortly. So I can see lots coming through on the chat. I haven't looked at the Q&A box yet, so I'm going to in a minute. If you haven't, if you've got a burning question, everyone, and you haven't put it in the Q&A box, please do. But before we do, I'm going to get Charity to extend upon what she's just spoken about in a really practical sense. So how do we make this real and achievable for people? I absolutely see the merits, but like, what are some things that people could do to bring this to life, to bring coaching for ethical goals and dilemmas like the ones we've discussed into their work or life?
So I think one of the things is to actually put these conversations around ethical leadership on the table, but lead the conversations from a sense of inquiry rather than, you know, one of the things that you say ethical leadership, and I think it triggers a lot of shame for people. They're like, oh no, don't look at me. You know, and I can even go to the fact like, I think I threw the wrong thing in the recycling the other day and didn't pull it out. You know, all of a sudden you think, no,
I'm in trouble.
I'm in
Yeah,
trouble. I've done something wrong. I'm not perfect. So I think creating a space where ethical leadership in your organizations is actually put on the table, and it is an inquiry. Like, what is our goal? What is each of your goals? What values are important? What is the thing that feels too big? And then what's the smallest thing? And so making sure that the inquiry ends in an action, even if it's a small action. And the one thing I'd say is that having coached many, many, many highly ambitious people, is asking someone who thinks in big pictures and is used to the idea of high performing and like outstanding results and shooting the lights out. If you say, what's the smallest thing, they'll say something enormous. So, you know, to be able to say, all right, what's even smaller than that? Like what's 1% of the thing that you just had, so that it's doable and it'll build. It's the first step on a journey of 1,000 miles.
Yeah. And I love the idea of using coaching to normalize some of these conversations as well. Of this is just kind of the grist and the grit of everyday life and everyday relationships and work and interacting with others. And it's, of course, we have examples of, you know, really egregious ethical failures out there, but actually ethical dilemmas are something you face every day, and we need to normalize those, and we need to recognize that these are things that it's very normal to work through, and it doesn't mean we have to have a very prohibitive conversation. We're
Or a
actually having an
defensive,
expansionary
yeah,
conversation.
or a defensive conversation. Yeah, one of the things that because I teach ethics as part of our coach training, and I've loved the idea of ethical dilemmas. I used to freeze when there was an ethical dilemma. So early on in my career, when I was like, "Oh, I don't know what to do, it doesn't feel right. I've noticed it, but maybe I'll just watch another episode of Ted Lasso and hope it goes away." Now, when I get one, because I've been doing this work for such a long time, I kind of get a bit like, "Ooh, I don't know what to do here. Like, what frameworks and what values?" And it's become, because I've practiced it, it's not scary anymore. And so I've become quite fluent. So, you know, when I supervise coaches and they bring me ethical dilemmas that I haven't heard of, I'm like, yes, excellent. Let's work it through. And the other thing I think that coaching helps with this is that if you're coming from a coaching mindset where the gold is within the people that you're working with, you don't have to be the expert. So you don't have to be the world's most perfect ethical person to host these conversations. You can just say, like, I don't know either. Let's do some exploration together. Like, what do you think could be possible? And you don't have to know before you start the conversation.
I'm going to go to the Q&A now. I could keep going, but I'm going to go to the Q&A. So I've got a question here from Renata Bernarde, who's been upvoted a couple of times. So when our work is too effective as coaches, when it helps clients see what they truly want or what's ethically misaligned in their work, are we also exposing them to risk they may not be ready for? How do we hold space for ethical clarity and ensure that we're not pushing someone into a situation their system can't yet support?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting dilemma. I think with moral agency, and this was something that came out in the colloquium, with moral agency comes the responsibility of dealing with the consequences. And so part of coaching, one, in what you've said, is to make sure through supervision that you're not pushing your agenda onto people, which is one part of it. And so I think, you know, if I was talking about coaching for ethical leadership, most of the organizational coaching that we do at IECL is coaching for leadership performance and well-being. And so if you're going to coach to support ethical leadership, that needs to be transparent and stated so that there is a kind of topic on the table that has an ethical lens. But also to ask people if they decide they're going to do something that maybe puts them in a position of having some risk, asking what are the risks and what are you going to do to mitigate those, and not to step into the role of protecting capable adults and let them make the decision for themselves. There's risk and consequence to every decision we make, including doing nothing. And a lot of the leaders that I coach are actually tired of doing nothing, and they're when they explore it, are ready to do something that is courageous, which of course is courageous because there is risk, and it's not our role as coaches to protect smart adults.
Thank you. Thanks, Charity. I've got another question here from Zora. What are the ethical dilemmas, Charity, you're noticing as a coach working with leaders in transformation and change, dealing with complexity? Like, is there anyone who's not working? Not working in complexity and transformation and change?
And I have to be like, and me as well, right? Everyone.
Yes.
I think at the heart of it, and this is going to massively simplify a very complex topic, is the inner sense that almost every human that I coach, every human that I've worked with, knows that some of the ways organizations implement change is unkind and ungenerous and could be done better, and yet it doesn't change. And so there's a split between what gets accepted, what we become resigned to, and I think in general there's a sense of, oh well, that's just the way it is. So the is versus the ought. There's no one bridging that gap. And I'm 20 years into corporate now, and I'm yet to see it. And now I'm worried that Catherine's going to coach me and I'm going to end up having a thing on my list. So I'm not going to keep going. But that's just what I see. That's not the truth, but that's my experience, is that no one's okay with how change is implemented. Sample size of one.
Mm.
Yeah.
Please everyone add comments into the chat as we go, because I think, and I'm going to come to a reflection from Laura that reflects this. I wouldn't say that Charity and I are putting ourselves up here as sages on the stage.
No.
This is an exploration. And so I know that each of you online will have a view about a number of these questions, and we really want to harness that collective wisdom. So please do share your thoughts as we go in the chat. Related to that, Laura Porter's got a wonderful reflection here. I wonder where the concept of binaries is playing out, as if there's a right or wrong, this or that kind of answer. And does a binary story limit our frame of ethics in leadership?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it plays out in a lot of thinking. Well, let me be really specific. I hear it a lot in my coaching, all or nothing. Either I accept everything how it is, or quit my job and go and move to the beach and learn to surf. And one of the things that I love about coaching is that it listens to those binaries and go, what might be a third perspective? What might be a fourth? What might someone that you really respect say is another alternative view of what's going on? So the perspective of coaching is to listen to the stated reality, whatever that is, but not take it as truth, and ask people to go deeper. And sometimes that ends up with people holding a paradox, which is, two truths or more being true at the same time. Sometimes it stretches their ability to take others' perspectives, or to take a different perspective that gets them out of that false dichotomy or binary, and allows them to see between 1 and 100, there's actually multiple different points here, and I can move along that in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Charity. And if I may add here as well, I mean, I think one of the things that we encounter, or I encounter sometimes in conversations with different people and organizations, is there's a sense that ethics is about right and or wrong, or it's also about good people and bad people.
Yeah.
And I think that ethics, as I've encountered it, is much more dynamic and deliberative than that. Often ethics is about context and practice. And I think, we've used the word practice a few times. I know you guys use the word practice in your sphere. And I think there's this sense of, is there right doing and wrong doing within the context of, certain standards and rules? Yes, absolutely. But there's a whole lot of gray, particularly in as emergent a world as we find ourselves in, with things like AI and kind of moving social phenomena like working from home and hybrid work. And I think we're wrestling with often competing goods, as you said, Charity. There wasn't a right answer there. I mean, obviously, as you say, often there is sort of something that in the long term will be for the good, but in the immediate term, thinking about harmony and kindness versus, honesty, is, they both have their merits. And so these are often polarities that we need to negotiate and find a balance between, as opposed to landing on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. So absolutely, Laura, I think it's a great comment and observation.
And I think also that's the idea of having multiple conversations, because what's true today, or right today, or most right today, is going to be different tomorrow. And so there is no one answer. It iterates.
Yeah.
And it's why I like the idea of ethical leadership being a verb, like a doing. What am I doing? Not what have I done, or what do I think? So that it evolves, because it's not stagnant. When we know more, we ideally do better.
Yeah, that's so right. And you're right, it evolves. I mean, we've got one of our faculty, Jack Stone, has a great example when she speaks about what happened in the 90s between Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, and what people focused on as the ethical contravention there. That at first it was about adultery, and that being, the thing that was the absolute egregious breach. Then it was about truth-telling and honesty. And now it's become about power.
Yep.
And so the wrestling with the
Yes.
dilemma and seeing it from different angles is just a continual practice. And I think the relational dimension or nature of coaching allows you to crack that open.
Yes. Yeah. And makes it safe to do it. Makes it,
Mm,
I'm just noticing out of the corner of my eye how many times normalizing comes up. Like
mm,
making it okay to say, I don't know. I feel like I know what I should do, but I can't. I'm not sure why, or I don't really know what I should be doing, or like making it safe. I think a lot of the time in leadership, the focus is on knowing and being very certain and not, what do they call it with politicians? Not flip-flopping.
mm,
I mean, ideally, you should be able to go, I don't know, or actually, I've changed my mind, or this is what I would have said yesterday, but today I'm saying this, and letting it move as we mature as a culture, as we, particularly in leadership, because AI is going to provide the knowledge if it gets reliable. That looks like where it's
mm,
going.
mm,
So
mhm.
the ability to question yesterday's decisions,
Yeah.
question what might we be doing tomorrow. That's going to be the thing. Normalizing not knowing and asking the questions and being able to sit in the, I don't know. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a spectrum, I think, between this is a whole other webinar we could have as well when we think about AI between information, knowledge, and then wisdom,
Oh
and
yeah.
something even more relational beyond that, which is
Yeah.
the wisdom of the group and the wisdom of an exchange.
Yes.
But I'm going to go back to the Q&A box.
Okay.
So Hamish has a question that's been upvoted a couple of times. How can coaches or counterparts get the most out of or prompt ethical coaching? So I guess this is a question perhaps from the perspective of someone who
As
is
a
a
coach.
leader or is not a leader
Yeah.
and is
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
to receive that kind of coaching.
So the kind of best practice in organizational coaching is that when you start to work with someone, you, in one way, shape, or form, get the organizational or the sponsor's goals for the coaching. So whoever's paying for it, their voice is included. That might be their leader or an HR and L&D person, but you also then get the goal, you ask the goal from the person that you're coaching. And those need to connect in some way, and it's easy enough to get them to. But I think if you wanted to be coached on ethical practice, it would be as simple as saying to your coach, one of my goals is to get better at ethical leadership, and they would be able to coach you on that. So that's quite an easy thing, is just to say that's what you would like the coaching to partially focus on.
Hmm. And I wonder if Hamish's question might also be related to how do I seek out coaching? So I imagine that is speak to IECL, but also perhaps how do I invite coaching approaches from the leaders around me in a workplace? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I mean, without our head of marketing is listening to this, so I'm go to, so one is go to iecl.com. That's the first piece. But the second one is, I actually think leaders have an enormous role in making a coaching approach psychologically safe. And I think that the way they have to do that is by showing some vulnerability first, particularly if you are in a position of power or authority or visibility, that your role as the leader is to stop leading with PowerPoints and spreadsheets and numbers, and say to the people that you're working with, I've made this mistake. I've made this ethical mistake. I think I've done the wrong thing here. I want to talk to you about what I'm learning from it. And so to make that okay, to create psychological safety by putting yourself vulnerable first, I think leaders who are able to say, I've got this goal or we've got this ambition, but I'm not sure how we're going to do it. What do other people think? I think if leaders want to invite a coaching approach that leans towards ethical leadership, they need to be talking about the triple bottom line, not just a financial bottom line. What is the best thing for profit, people, and sustainability and the environment? We're starting to see some stuff in B Corps, and there's some stuff happening. But one of the things I think, both from years of teaching coaching and years of teaching leadership and practicing both imperfectly, is that if you wait for someone else to do it, it'll never happen. And so leaders need to stand up and do that first.
Yeah.
They need to show that it's safe to say, I don't know, or I messed up, or I actually haven't thought about the ethical or the values-based implications of this decision, help me understand how this is going to impact the people here, people working here, the people in society. So
I know that this doesn't strictly follow the open question methodology of the
yeah,
coaching framework, but I often, in the context of self-coaching or self-talk, think about the questions, if not me, who, if not now, when,
yeah,
which I think are very powerful questions to ask yourself in terms of creating action and accountability.
I think so. And a little bit of healthy discomfort too, which is
Yeah.
we're going to have to post that thing on LinkedIn.
I expect you to have lots of LinkedIn requests at the end of today as well. Everyone online will be adding you.
Just to see if I do the thing or not.
I want to close with one question here, which I think is a really interesting one from Chiha, which is, as an employee, I often hear aspirations from senior leadership to empower people and not tell them what to do, which is nice in theory and similar to the coaching principle.
Yep.
But in reality, you are left to solve problems by yourself and could often feel overwhelmed with that. Is that meant to be a necessary part of becoming a leader? And I just want to jump in with something here that I gleaned from my coaching certification before I hand the floor to you, Charity, which is one of the most powerful things, or rather one of the first aha moments I had in my coaching certification was I kind of went, I had a similar thing. I was like, yeah, this coaching stuff's great, but I'm not sure how it's going to work in every situation, when sometimes I will have a really clear way about how something needs to get done. And one of the things, and I know that's the right way, and it just needs to happen quickly. One of the things that we talked about on the first day was actually coaching is a hat you put on. So you choose to reach into your bag of leadership capabilities or tools, and you say coaching is one of the things that I use when there is reciprocity, when the counterpart wants to be coached and is agreeing to be coached, when it's the right fit, as opposed to something I just kind of deploy in all instances. But I just wanted to add that. Curious to hear your thoughts on that, Charity, in the context of Chiha's question.
Yeah, absolutely. One size fits none. And so if your leaders are saying, you know, apply a coaching approach and you work it out, ideally also they're leaving the door open for you to go, but actually, could you teach me something? Or I need some training, or where can I go to help me with this? And it's not an abdication of all of the other hats that leaders need to be wearing. Coaching isn't the only one. We feel really strongly that it's the most undervalued and underdeveloped leadership competency, but it doesn't mean that coaching is the best one. It just means that it needs to be engaged more, and people need to learn how to do it to get the best out of their people. But, you know, one of the other things that often happens, Chiha, is that leaders will hear coaching approach and think, great, now I don't have to give feedback or have those difficult conversations or manage people. I'll just coach them. You go, no, you still need to lead. You still need to manage. You still need to have difficult conversations. We just want to add coaching to it, both as a way of creating the permission and capability of more critical thinking of the people that you work with, to open the space for innovation, to open the space for ethical inquiry, ideally. But it's not an either or, and it's certainly not instead of everything else. It's an and.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautifully said, Charity. Thank you. So we are pretty much nearly on time. And so unfortunately, I'm going to start to wrap this conversation up. There are a lot more questions in the Q&A box. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to them all. Perhaps we need to do a part 2 very soon. I've hugely enjoyed this. What's staying with me really since we've started speaking, Charity, is the idea of ethics as a verb rather than a noun, and how coaching can support us to practice this as a sort of ongoing exercise and way of practicing together. As we wrap the session, I would like to pose a coaching question, if I may, to each person in the audience. And I'll invite you, if you want to write it down into the chat box, to please do so, or you may want to write it down in front of you and not share it with everyone. But I'm going to ask each member in the audience, what's one concrete thing from this conversation that you want to experiment with this week? Other than going onto LinkedIn, adding Charity and hounding her to to make good on her
Vision ever.
So, Charity, is there anything that you want to add or reflect on before we close?
Just that if this conversation has a small ripple effect, I hope it's that a little bit to what we talked about, Catherine, when we were talking about it, is that I think coaching can be the vehicle, the how we turn the concept or the noun of ethical leadership into a practice. And in any way that people are wanting to start experimenting with that, I hope we've given them something that they can go away and start.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's been a really valuable conversation for myself. I want to thank Charity for all of her insights and input and for being vulnerable with us today in our coaching demo. Thank you, Charity. Thank you to our colleagues at IECL. So this is the start of a beautiful partnership. We're going to be doing lots more things together. So please do stay tuned on our websites and our mailing lists for more collabs to come. Further to this, for those of you that have enjoyed this conversation, please mark your calendars for next Wednesday, the 6th at 1, when Charity and IECL will be returning the favour and hosting Cranlana's Dr. Matt Beard for a conversation on ethical decision making. Charity, anything you want to add on that?
No, just please come. We're really looking forward to another perspective on like how could we actually start interrogating our own decision making.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this short course that we're also going to be launching, which some of you may have heard about, which Dr. Matt Beard's leading, Choices That Matter on Ethical Decision Making, that's going to be doing a lot of what we've talked about today. So moving through the component parts of ethical inquiry and action. So if you've liked what you've heard today, if you're looking for a new goal to set, then please think about signing up, and we'll share that link around after this, along with some info on IECL's upcoming initiatives as well. So I think that's us.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for showing up for an hour and listening to us talk about ethical leadership and coaching.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Catherine.
Charity. Thanks, IECL. And thanks to each of you for the commitment and the curiosity that brought you here today. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon.